Wednesday, May 6th, 2020. We do in fact have a quorum. Members, just to remind you, this is an official meeting. It is being recorded and live streamed. And we do have a hard stop at 2:50. First on the agenda today is Senate File 4511, Senator Newman. Is Senator Newman with us?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Newman, welcome to the committee. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members. I'm bringing to you Senate File 4511, which is a bill that I had drafted to try and address the idea of getting some of our folks in Minnesota back to work. Before I talk about the bill, though, I do want to make this mention of this, and I really hope that you'll take to heart what I have to say. I have not brought this bill forward to be in any way critical of the governor. To the contrary, I think the governor was handed an unprecedented emergency that he has done his best to handle. And initially, he had very little information about this disease in order to make decisions to help him. I don't think he had the information, for instance, as how infectious it was. I don't think that he had information as to what the mortality rate would be. And so he made the best decisions that he could at the time. Since then, however, we have gained a lot of information and a lot of data. And I truly believe that there are 201 legislators in the state of Minnesota that are standing by that want to help him move forward in some kind of a meaningful way. And the underlying criteria in my mind is, number one, we have to try and keep the people in the state of Minnesota safe, while at the same time, we've got to try and figure out a way to move our economy forward. Now, we just got off the floor and we listened to Senator Bach and we listened to Senator Cohen talk about just how difficult the upcoming session is going to be next year because of our budget crisis. And so that is something that I think is really important that we absolutely have to pay attention to. So it's that balancing act that I'm with this bill trying to thread that needle. The bill is really quite simple in that we are suggesting that to Minnesota businesses that so long as they follow the directives of the governor's emergency declaration, that they should be able to simply go back to work, reopen their businesses, and comply with the governor's directives. I think that especially small businesses in the state of Minnesota, of which there are thousands and thousands, there are hundreds of thousands of people in Minnesota that are employed by these small businesses, and they have been inordinately hurt by what has happened with this pandemic. Now, just for example, in my hometown, I can walk into Target and I can buy things, but I can't walk into a Main Street store because they are closed. And I just don't think that is a fair way to address this. This immediate past weekend, I had 235 emails from business owners in my district from McLeod County and Meeker County, literally begging me to do something to help them so that they can reopen their businesses and survive financially. So I bring to your attention that I don't think that Minnesota is New York, and I don't think McLeod County, where I live, is Hennepin County. And by that, I mean one size does not fit all. And so I have brought this bill forward. I'm looking forward to a discussion. I'm open to ideas. But in the end, I think that we have to trust that the governor is going to give us the best advice that he has in terms of directives to keep our folks in Minnesota safe. and give us directives as to how businesses can safely operate without putting people in jeopardy. With that information, I think we have to trust our businesses to follow those directives and operate in a manner that will allow businesses to open their doors, serve their customers, and financially survive. I think we also have to give a certain amount of credit to the customers that'll patronize those businesses, because those folks know from their own personal situations as to whether or not it's safe for them to go out. So for instance, you may have an elderly person with an underlying health condition is going to choose not to patronize those businesses because it jeopardizes those. But you may have a very healthy 35 or a 40-year-old that thinks it's perfectly safe to go in under the governor's directives to do business in their local community. So I guess what I'm asking is that you contemplate and you ask yourself, what's wrong with the game plan where we follow what the governor is asking us to do in terms of safety measures, and while at the same time allow our business to go back into operation. And that's the balance that I think that we're looking for, is to, number one, keep us safe, and number two, allow the people to get back to work. Because quite frankly, the very things that Senator Cohen and Senator Bach and Senator Gazelka are talking about on the Senate floor, this budget crisis that is looming for us next year, the only way that we're going to solve that problem is to let people go back to work, because that's where the money comes from in order to run this state of ours. We have to balance that somehow. So I think it's reasonable to ask that we develop a game plan where we're going to follow the directives and then allow people to go back to work in accordance with those directives. The only other thing that I wanted to mention before I go is, I think in your packet, I think posted, if nothing else, there is a letter from some various chambers of commerce to the governor that I think went out yesterday. I will tell you that there's over 80 members of the Chamber of Commerce that have signed on to this letter, 2 of which are in my district. So I would just like to talk about this and see if we can come up with some way to help the governor and help us and help our constituents move forward as we try and address this, not only the pandemic, but the budget crisis that we know is coming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Newman. And before we get started with questions, why don't we get through our testifiers. I see Mr. Hickey, but he's had some technical difficulties, is still connecting to audio. Why don't we jump ahead to Ms. Heising? We'll get her started first, and then we'll get back to Mr. Hickey. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Heising. Please state your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today. My name is Melissa Heising, and I am Legislative Director for the Minnesota AFL-CIO, the state's labor federation of more than 1,000 local unions who represent more than 300,000 working people across our state. I'm here in opposition to Senate File 4511 because it does not protect workers. Last week, the labor movement held our annual observance of Worker Memorial Day to remember those who have been injured or died on the job. The ceremony usually takes place at the Workers' Memorial on the Capitol lawn, which you can see in my Zoom background. But of course, this year we held the event by video. As we heard from workers on the front lines across the state, it was more clear than ever that now is the time to renew the fight for safer jobs. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, that fight has taken on new urgency. We owe it to all working people in Minnesota right now to put worker safety and protection first in any conversation around reopening workplaces. With that, I want to share the AFL-CIO's 8-point plan for reopening the economy the right way. Number 1, workers must have a say in these decisions at every level: workplace, industry, city, state, and federal. 2, decisions must be based on worker safety and sound science. 3, strong, clear, and enforceable workplace health and safety standards must be in place. 4, workers must have stronger protections against retaliation. 5, there must be a massive increase in adequate levels and types of PPE for workers currently on the job and then for those returning to the job. 6, there must be a massive increase of rapid and reliable coronavirus testing. 7, the federal government must oversee a system of recording, reporting, and tracking worker infections. Number 8, employers, in coordination with local and state public health departments, must trace the contacts of infected workers and remove exposed workers from work with pay and without retaliation. Senate File 4511 allows bars, restaurants, and other places of public accommodation to reopen without a plan to ensure the safety of workers, without consulting workers, without training workers on any safety plan, without requiring documentation, and without protecting workers from retaliation for voicing safety concerns. It simply states these establishments must follow CDC and MDH guidelines without any reference to Minnesota OSHA standards and without any reference to oversight and enforcement by DEED or DLI. Moreover, we are talking about the types of workplace settings that have the highest potential for spreading COVID-19, which is why they are currently closed by executive order. I encourage you all to remember all the workers across Minnesota who are afraid that their working conditions do not or will not adequately protect them and their families from COVID-19, and respectfully request that you vote no on Senate File 4511. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Looks like we have Mr. Hickey now. Mr. Hickey, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
Mike Hickey, Mr. Chairman, with the National Federation of Independent Business. I'm blacked out as far as what I can see. Maybe that's a good thing. Anyway, so thanks for having me here and having some technical difficulties a minute ago. But as you know, National Federation of Independent Business is the state's largest small business group with about 10,000 members. And what a critical time of crisis for our membership. Many have been closed. Many's financial futures are really in a lurch. And we're afraid we're going to lose possibly a significant number of members here. And so I really want to thank Senator Newman for bringing this bill forward and for you to take the time to hear. I think it's got to be about the most urgent bill you can hear right now as it plays into our whole conversation and debate about how do we go forward from this crisis right now. Many of our members are very upset and feel it's extremely unfair that we can all crowd into large box retailers, and apparently that's supposed to be a safe shopping experience, but you cannot go to a small business, possibly in the same mall or possibly down the street, where sometimes you're the only customer, or your expectation is there'll be very few customers. And there you can certainly have a safe, possibly a safer shopping experience in a small business where typically the shops are not crowded, and often, due to my own experience, I've been the only customer for the brief time I was there. There's so much we can do to facilitate this. We could come up with a square footage rule. We could limit the number of customers based on square feet. Ohio has set a rule at 10 customers per shop. There's so many social distancing requirements that could either be strongly recommended or required, but we need to allow these small businesses to reopen, and we need to reopen the Minnesota economy, and the time has come, and we're strongly urging Governor Walz through another alert we're sending out today to do that. And you know, as the experts have said, we're going to need to learn to live with this virus until an effective vaccine is developed, and we hope that's all sooner and later. But I think today this is a first step on trying to learn to live with this and manage this without completely tanking our state's economy, not to mention digging a huge budget hole that our senators, representatives, and Governor Walz will have to deal with if we continue on the same course. So thanks for the time today, and want to thank Senator Newman again for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Finally, we have Mr. Luneberg, and with Unite Here Local 17 is, there you are. I'm looking at my little Brady Bunch screen here and having a hard time finding everybody. So welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and feel free to begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Pratt, committee members. My name is Wade Luneberg. I'm the political director for Unite Here here in Minnesota. We have 8,000 workers in hospitality in 22 union hotels, our convention centers, all of our major sports arenas, and we have 1,400 people on the field at MSP Airport and in-flight catering and concessions. Thank you for letting me speak today. And I'll keep my comments to an industry that I know well, over 40 years, hospitality. I do stand in opposition today to Senate File 4511. As my associate, Ms. Heising, testified, our priority is making sure that workers will be safe in the eventual reopening of our industry. Being able to return to work with confidence in a safe workplace for yourself as a worker and for the consumer is what will measure the success in reopening the industry. To that end, Unite Here is participating along with other stakeholders in an industry-wide set of calls and initiatives hosted by Deed Commissioner Grove that includes Hospitality Minnesota, craft brewers, interstate operators like Darden Restaurants, Minnesota operator Parasole, industry attorneys and professionals, and others. And it's my understanding that this is happening in various sectors of the economy at Deed. We need to be deliberate and clear in moving forward these coming days that leads to any reopened industry, so that we learn from the process here and in other states, and from other states, I should say, that would mitigate and avoid disruption down the road. The initiative is setting the table and an orderly process that will get this critical industry back to business. I'm personally enthused to see the various stakeholders involved, and with the shared interest in getting back to business, supporting and protecting the workforce, and delivering again to the consumer a safe and healthy product and experience that Minnesotans expect. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Newman.
May I respond very briefly to the comments from the testifiers?
Senator Newman, you're recognized. Go ahead.
Thank you. 3 points that I want to make is the first would be this bill in no way suspends OSHA type laws that are put in place for the workers. Those laws, of course, would remain in full force and effect. Second, I would urge the representatives of the folks who have just testified that unless we fix our looming budget crisis, I would anticipate that there would be next year massive layoffs in both union and non-union occupations. And one of the ways to try and stem that would be to get people back to work, because I truly believe the only way that that's going to happen is to have our economy moving forward. The third point, they have raised an issue regarding employee protection, which I think is a very valid and very good point. We could consider, Mr. Chairman, at line 1.13 and 1.14 to amend the bill, and I'm gonna leave this up to the committee, but I would certainly accept it. To amend the bill to indicate or to include businesses and employers, employees, and the public. And now I think we would have all sectors covered in terms of the protection. And I do believe that the employees have every right in the world to be protected, as does the public. So I would throw that idea out there if the committee wishes to discuss it and maybe amend the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Senator Newman, and you know, you bring up an interesting point, because the Department of Labor has set out a preparedness plan that addresses almost all of the concerns that have been raised. But I do have a request from Ms. Heising. Since you addressed her directly, or her comments directly, she'd like to have just a brief moment to respond, and then I'd like to get to senators. So Ms. Heising.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Newman. With regard to the economy and the budget deficit, I think that if we don't ensure workers' health and safety are protected, number one, they won't go back on the job. And number two, it will create a situation where COVID-19 spreads so they can't go back on the job. So protecting worker health and safety, I believe, is the number one thing that we need to do if we want to protect the economy. Thank you.
Okay. First on the list, we have Senator Champion, followed by Senator Draheim, Housley, and Rarick. I have you all on the list. So we'll start with Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the author of the bill, a couple questions. Senator Newman, you talked about this in no way seeks to undermine the governor in any shape, form, or fashion. But doesn't your bill suggest that notwithstanding the governor's executive orders, that if someone submits some plan to someone, that they can defy the governor's executive order and then go right back to work?
Senator Newman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Champion, in my estimation, the answer is no. This isn't about defying the governor's order. It is about complying with his directives. And if businesses are in a position to comply with the directives as outlined by the governor and his agencies, then people would have a right to go back to work. So no, I am not trying to challenge the governor. I am trying to work with him, and this is one of the ways I thought it might work.
Senator Newman, Mr. Chair, isn't it true, though, if you read the language, it says notwithstanding, and notwithstanding means in spite of. So even though it might not be your intention, the bill seeks to say that if a business submits a plan that they believe is important, it doesn't matter if the governor has said or will say in the future that we're not rolling out an executive order that would allow them to go back to work, that they would be able to do so. And the second part of my question is, so I hope that you'll go back and look at the language in your bill and speak to the language, not your intent. The other thing, Senator Newman, have you had any conversation with Commissioner Grove or the governor's office to talk about what work they've done with a cross-section of business partners, such as the chambers and others? Because it's my understanding they are having constant dialogue with every sector of the business community in order to get guidance as it pertains to what one should do in order to be prepared, or suggestions for how their business should be able to roll out going forward. So can you speak to that, and whether you've had any dialogue with the governor, whether you've had any dialogue with Senator Grove, in order to be certain as to what work they've done with those business sectors, and how that information they've gained from those business sectors influence their decisions around executive orders?
Senator Newman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Champion, in answer to your second question, no, I have not had any conversations with the governor on this issue. As to your first question, Executive Order 20.04 is currently in place, and I wouldn't expect that the governor would withdraw or cancel that order. When I'm using the word notwithstanding the executive order, I do maintain that what I'm trying to do is work with him. So he has an executive order that is in place and operational. And in addition to that executive order, this bill, which is being discussed in the legislature, would work in concert with Executive Order 20.04.
Mr. Chair, just one follow-up question that I hope that Senator Newman would answer. So Senator Newman, help me understand this. Let's say this bill goes forward, and and I don't believe that the governor will sign it, but let's say the bill goes forward and could be adopted today. So we were to adopt it right now, just based on the language. And we know that the governor has a current executive order. And let's say a business like a salon would say, that's on Main Street, that would say, here's my plan. My plan is to do A, B, C, D, F, G. And who would be able to say if that's a viable plan, number one? And number two, if the governor has not lifted or put forth an executive order that says a salon can go back into function, even though this business has put forth a plan in our scenario, would that business be able to go back into their daily business and practice?
Senator Newman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Champion, this bill does not anticipate that a business would be required to submit a plan. This bill anticipates that any business that desires to reopen and go back into business would be required to follow the executive orders in terms of directives from a standpoint of safety and safety in the workplace, safety for the employees and for the public. Not much different than what people would do before this pandemic was upon us. They simply decided they want to go to work, and they go to work. The governor has got, and I have forgotten, quite honestly, Senator Champion, how many outstanding executive orders there are. But I know that there are many, many of them, and they are continuing to come, and appropriately so. What is be required under this bill is for a business to comply with those orders. And if they are able to reopen their business in compliance with the executive orders, then they could do so without it being an illegal opening for which they could be prosecuted.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Next, we have Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair Pratt and committee members. Thank you, Senator Newman, for bringing this bill forward. I think it's much needed. A lot of the comments I was going to make, either Senator Pratt or Senator Newman made about the oversight and the employee safety. OSHA already oversees our businesses I've been involved in. We have the guidance from the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health. If we don't do this, how long are we going to be shut down as small business people like myself? The clothes all of us have on are professional dress clothes that we wear to the Senate that we're required to wear. So if you have a small shop selling ties and shirts, you normally have under 5 people in the store at any given time. How is that not safe to operate? Where are the safety concerns with the employees? It can be done. We can have limits on doors saying how many people could come in. We can have sanitary guidelines just like we do here. We have hand sanitizer and wipes everywhere located throughout the Capitol. We social distance, close break rooms, close lunch rooms. There's no reason we can't apply this to our small shops on Main Street in all of our districts. So as far as talking with the governor and Commissioner Grove, I have talked to Commissioner Grove. I have not talked to the governor. I have sent many emails to the governor's office. Haven't really got a real response on any of them. But fundamental question, how long are we going to not operate? Is it going to be 2 years? How many hotels are going to be left in 2 years? None will be available. I've talked to multiple hotel owners. They're getting 1 or 2 people stay there a night. And, their tax bills coming up, they're not going to make it. So thank you, Senator Newman, for bringing this forward.
Okay, next we have Senator Housley and then Senator Rarick on the list. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Chair Pratt, and thank you, Senator Newman, for bringing this forward. To Senator Draheim's point, right? How long are we going to stay closed? We've got so many small businesses in our community. I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, but more than 80 chambers across the state submitted a letter on behalf of their businesses. Mine, Stillwater, Forest Lake, both of them are on this, a letter to the governor begging him to let them reopen safely. We've got a store on Main Street. She's got all of her arrows typed or taped out on the floor. She's ready. The extra cost for her to take a picture of each little gift in the shop to put it online so she can do curbside pickup doesn't make any sense at all. Doesn't make any sense at all that you can drive across country and stay in a hotel, but yet you can't take your own Winnebago and go stay at a campground. These small business owners are really, really hurting, and they do want to open safely, and they do want to work with the governor for a plan, but we don't have a plan, and they can't wait much longer. So thank you so much, Senator Newman, for bringing this forward on behalf of so many Minnesotans that are hurting right now. So thank you.
Next, we have Senator Rarick, followed by Senator Isaacson. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and want to kind of reiterate some of these points, how critical it is to get some of these businesses back open. And as a union member myself, you know, I know concerns that are there around safety. That's one of the big reasons I believe it's a good thing to unionize. Your union helps promote that and watch out for safety issues on the jobs. But I guess I would like to ask either Ms. Heising or Mr. Lunenburg, you know, have their organizations considered that if these businesses go out of place, is there an acceptable percentage of their membership that's going to end up out of a job forever and looking for different work? Have they thought about that? That, you know, I mean, we have to start thinking about this across the sectors, whether it's state government or whatever. We saw the budget forecast yesterday. We have to make huge cuts, and we can't just sit by and watch some of these salons and bars and restaurants fold and let those people suffer without expecting that other things are going to happen to other people as well. And so I would just like them to respond. Is there a percentage that's acceptable to lose in this?
So looks like Ms. Heising is ready, and then we'll go to Mr. Lunenburg.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Rarick. I don't think it's an either or. I think worker safety has to be at the forefront. And there's nothing in this bill that ensures that. Workers need to be protected to get the economy back. I think some of the protections laid out in Executive Order 2040 provided for plans, worker input, and protection from retaliation, and a lot more detail than is in this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Lunenburg.
Yeah, Chair and committee, and again, Melissa has really addressed some of those safety concerns. But I guess I would say, Senator Rarick, that we're already experiencing 90% plus layoffs in the industry. So I really don't think that there is probably an acceptable percentage of loss. By the end of the year, even in a best case scenario, we're going to be experiencing probably still a 40% deficit in the workforce. But I think that we also, and Hospitality Minnesota has talked about some of these issues over the years, that we are going to see changes in the industry. And as a worker representative, those are things that we need to accept as well. And that we are in uncharted territory when it comes to this industry, particularly. And no, there is not an acceptable amount of loss in the industry when it comes to the workforce. But we still need to proceed safely for the worker and for the consumer.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Senator Rarick, you had a follow-up?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think I appreciate Mr. Lunenburg's response that there's no acceptable amount. But to me, there's no acceptable amount of these businesses that should go under in the process as well. And it's the worker can't bring the economy back if there's no business to work for. That has to be kept in mind. If these businesses go under, there's no place for the workers to go back to work, thus paying income taxes and then all the other taxes that are generated from the businesses and from wages. We can't continue to support all of the unemployment and the extra benefits that have been given. It's a temporary thing to get us through, but if the businesses don't open back up, there will be no jobs for people, and then our economy really goes south. So, I don't think, just like Senator Newman said, we already have provisions in law to protect workers. None of this bill doesn't take any of that away. And until we get over our fears and allow healthy people who are willing to get back into this economy to get out there and do the things that they've been doing for generations, for some of them, we're not going to recover from this. And if we shut this down and these businesses go under, who in their right mind will ever open that type of business again? It won't happen. So we absolutely need to be having these discussions. Is this bill going to be exactly what we do? Maybe not, but it is a great stalking point to get started and figure out how we get these businesses back open and help our economy recover. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rick. Next, we have Senator Isaacson, followed by Senator Cohn, and then I have some thoughts. Senator Isaacson.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Senator Newman for the thoughtful way in which he presented this in the beginning. I felt like you brought this forward almost like a thought exercise to have us have that discussion, to be open there. Well, I have no doubt you want to pass a bill. I appreciate that a discussion is going to occur. However, and watching this discussion, I am continually amazed by the kind of all or nothing, this or that attitude about how this is supposed to be working. When you ask what I think is a pretty responsible question to people, like what's an acceptable amount of business to be closed, it makes me want to ask my friends across the aisle, what's an acceptable amount of death that's okay with to keep the economy going? Because that's the exact opposite absurd question that could be asked when we talk about this. If you look at the numbers, they're growing increasingly. There's no doubt about that, right? And when you look at the guidelines the governor followed in making decisions about what should be open and what should not be open, it's quite clear he followed the Department of Homeland Security's guidelines on that. This isn't like he just made this up on his own. And so when I hear the rhetoric that talks about the governor did this or the governor did that, I want to remind everybody, we have people dying every day from this crisis, every day, and it's growing every single day. And so to pretend like this argument you're making about keeping business open in some sort of vacuum that doesn't apply to the real world drives me crazy, because the reality is there's reasons why these things get set up. Could we make them better? Sure. Are we about that discussion? Yes. Is that what seemed like Senator Newman talked about in the beginning of this discussion? Absolutely. Is that where I've heard some of the people recently talking about this go? No. No, nobody wants to see these businesses close. There's no master plan out there to make that happen. Nobody wants to see that happen, right? But public safety is important. And being thoughtful and prudent about this is important. And the governor has been the most thoughtful and the most prudent. And over 70% of Minnesotans agree with him on the way he's handled this. So we want to have an honest discussion about having how we can save our economy. Let's do it, but let's leave that kind of crazy language out of there. And asking angry questions to people who are representing constituents doesn't get us any closer to that. And that's just a really frustrating thing to see. I am very passionate about seeing small business survive in our district. I've advocated for it on numerous occasions. It is not a zero-sum game. We have to be prudent and take care of business. And I'd like to see us meet in the middle when we have that kind of rhetoric and discussion about it. And I don't feel like that's what's happened as of late. And so it's just disheartening to hear that. We have a bill here that I think was brought up with good intentions. And then I see the conversation just slipping off to the side again. And I'd like to stay focused on discussing how do we work with the governor and making this successful. And if we're bringing bills before a committee that have effects on the governor, have had the conversation with the governor's office to make sure that they understand what we're trying to do, that this is a working partnership that's going on. That's not what it seems like when I see the bills coming out of the aisle, across the aisle from my friends in the GOP. And if we're going to have some sort of positive moving forward and solving this problem, which is going to be greater than any of us want to admit, then we need to work together on that.
Well, Senator Isaacson, and to that point, I think we have been working with the department. I've been in contact with Senator Grove on multiple occasions concerning these types of things. So I think it's unfair to say that we've not worked with the administration. We have not shared our concerns with the administration is not an accurate statement. We have. And this is not coming as a surprise to anybody. And so I would just want to make sure that your comments are in the right context.
Well, but Mr. Chair, if I might, I think that you've been very thoughtful as a chair, but I do agree with Senator Isaacson that we've gone beyond us coming together as a thoughtful group in order to see what's in the best interest of all Minnesotans. The way this bill is being presented as a zero-sum game, that's the way it's been presented. And it's been being presented as if no one else wants businesses to survive or be open and to be prosperous, but it's the others who don't want them open. And the reason why I asked the questions earlier that I did that never got answered, and I would like Senate Counsel to tell me if my interpretation of this bill is true, because it gets to the heart of the matter. We can't say on one hand that we support the governor and we're with the governor and the governor's been thoughtful, but even though you're relying, governor, on all of this important information and you're getting a cross-section of information from business leaders and others, and you're using all of that information in order to roll out something that's in the best interest of Minnesota, but then we turn around and say, but we don't think he's really doing the right thing. And then when I asked the question, well, have you talked to the governor's office? Senator Newman, have you talked to Commissioner Grove to see what they've been doing? And the answer was no. And here's what I find interesting that we are ignoring. What I find interesting that we're ignoring is the fact that simply opening up a business is not always in the best interest of the economy or the people who work there. What about JSB? What about our meat packing plants?
We can come back to you in a minute. We have a lot of other folks waiting. If you can wrap up your comments, please.
Okay. But as we think about JSB and the other meatpacking plants, we allowed them to be open. They came up with a plan. Our governor embraced that plan. And look at the number of people who are affected, workers. And you know what we miss, Mr. Chair? We miss the families because they go home to somebody. And so, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I will come back. You can come back to me later. My hand is raised, and then I'll finish.
You're out of order. We've got a lot of other members. As the ranking member, I do give you a lot of leeway, but I think this has gone beyond that. And certainly you'll have an opportunity to close at the beginning. My comments were specifically to the comments that the GOP has not reached out to the governor or the administration, and I want to set that straight, that is not in fact correct, in that I have been in contact with Commissioner Grove on this and many other ideas. And
but Mr. Chair, my comment was simply that these two bills that have came forward in the last 2 weeks, they had not been, and that's what I was referring my comments to.
Well, and again, your comments were broader than that, even though maybe that's what you intended. With that, we'll go to Senator Cohen.
So, Mr. Chairman, my comments were going to be quite similar to Senator Isaacson and Senator Champion. I'll just emphasize, I'm not quite sure why at this juncture we're trying to tie the governor's hands and in effect substitute the judgment of the legislature, which has not been involved on a day-to-day basis with the complexity of these issues, as has the governor, his commissioners, and other members of the administration. I mentioned this on the floor, and I realize we shouldn't necessarily legislate based upon polling or a perception of public opinion. But as I mentioned on the floor, I was very struck yesterday by the survey research poll, and let's believe to be a fairly good national outfit, suggesting 82% of the people in the state support how the governor has handled this. Let's not tie his hands with this legislation. Obviously, he wants every single business opened as quickly as possible in as safe a way as can be. None of us disagree on that. Where I think we disagree is understand the magnitude of what we're facing. I'm not talking about the fiscal issue, I'm talking about the health issue. the magnitude of what we're facing, this is unheard of. And I think that people want to make sure they are safe before anything else takes place. And that's been the governor's paramount interest. And he has made that point over and over again. So I would ask members to please keep in mind that this is not simply what we all hope to be a temporary closure of a particular business. This is about protecting the safety and the health of citizens of Minnesota. That's what's been paramount with the governor. I think that's what's paramount, I hope, with every legislator. And I think this legislation, however, is not simply a step backwards from that. It's an immense leap backwards from that.
Thank you, Senator Cohen.
You're welcome.
Let me just make a couple of comments, and then I might have a quick suggestion before we get to other testifiers or other questions. We have some senators that are on the list wanting some additional questions. And I think the issue with this bill and many of the conversations that I've had with the administration have been around the idea of balance. And you're right, Senator Cohen, we haven't been involved on a day-to-day basis, and we would have liked the legislature to have been involved in more of these discussions along the way. And that just hasn't happened. But in the meantime, it's easy to talk about small businesses and make them very generic, homogeneous, almost faceless. But the fact of the matter is that these small businesses are owned by our neighbors. And I walked into one restaurant and did takeout, and the guy looked at me and goes, "How long is this going to last? I've got my home, I've got my entire life savings tied up in this business. And if this fails, I fail." His life is in ruins. And that's the piece that, for me, is sticking with it. It's not the fact that this is business or not business, commerce or not commerce. This is about my neighbors and their survival through this as well. No one wants to take a step backwards. And I think Senator Newman laid it out very, very well in that we're not trying to do a black or white bill. We don't want to lose the gains that we've made over these last few weeks in flattening the curve on the healthcare crisis and moving it out. We want to keep those gains. And I think the governor's done a good job of making sure we've done that. But I also, in my opinion, believe that we've moved too slow as we've continued to address the issues of our Main Street businesses. And so, with that, and all of our Main Street businesses want to make sure their customers, and if they have employees, make sure their employees are safe. Not all of these folks have employees. So Ms. Fontaine, as I was listening to the discussion and Senator Newman's thoughts, I was wondering if we could do something along the lines of after line 1.13 in the bill, after prevention, add a comma and say upon completion of a COVID-19 preparedness plan as defined by the Department of Labor, comma. And members, while she's doing that, let me give you the thoughts behind that. When the governor announced that he was going to sign the executive order that would allow non-facing office and manufacturers to open up, he said, "You don't have to send me a plan. You just have to have one drafted." And I can tell you the small shops in Scott County and restaurants in Scott County have developed these plans to ensure that their customers and their employees are safe. We've sent those plans to the governor. We've sent those plans to both Commissioner Grove and Commissioner Leppink. Both sat on a community forum with me to discuss those ideas. And I think this is consistent with the idea that we're not trying to go above and beyond the governor. We're not trying to overcome employee safety. But we are trying to, and we are in fact following a process and procedure that the governor laid out at the end of April and addresses, quite honestly, one of the key concerns that were raised by the Department of Economic Development when we heard the Matthews bill, was that they couldn't handle all the plans being submitted to them for review. And so, Ms. Fontaine, I don't know if I'm right. You've had a chance to kind of write some things down. I've seen you scribbling frantically. Am I somewhere in the ballpark?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So you're saying that the business would develop their own plan, that they would have it, that they would develop a plan, but it wouldn't need to be submitted to any agency. They would just need to have something that they've developed. And you want that in addition to adherence to the guidance from CDC and Minnesota Department of Health, and development of by the business of a plan that then they could move forward to open up. So I think you said on line 1.13, did you say after prevention?
Correct.
And then I said and upon development by the business of a plan and then it would say to assist businesses and employers in providing a safe and healthful workplace and business operation. I am not sure that's exactly flows perfectly. Did you have something else written that you said before?
Yeah, so what I was trying to do was reference specifically the COVID-19 preparedness plan defined by the Department of Labor.
I'm sorry, once again, Mr. Chair, you said
the
COVID-19
preparedness plan as defined by the Department of Labor.
So, Mr. Chair, then after prevention and upon development of by the business of a COVID-19 preparedness plan as defined by the Commissioner of Labor and Industry.
Correct. Comma.
To assist businesses in and employers in providing a safe and healthful workplace and business operation. I can read that again.
Please.
Okay, so on line 1.13, after prevention, insert a comma, and upon development by the business of a COVID-19 preparedness plan as defined by the Commissioner of Labor and Industry, comma, and then to assist businesses and employers in providing a safe and healthful workplace and business operation.
Senator Newman, any thoughts on the oral amendment?
If I may, just a question, Mr. Chairman. This would be a plan developed by the business as opposed to a plan being developed by the Office of Preparedness?
Correct. Senator Newman, back on April 30th, the Department of Labor put out a template for a COVID-19 preparedness plan for businesses to fill out that address many of the concerns that were raised by Ms. Heising and Mr. Luneberg. And they would have to document those, make those available to their employees, and make it available to the Department of Labor if a complaint were filed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is information I did not have. I appreciate it, and I would certainly accept the chair's recommendation for that amendment.
I have a question about the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Senator Champion.
To Senate Council, if this language was placed in, would it mean that if a business put forth this plan or at least designed it for themselves because they wouldn't have to submit it anywhere. Would that mean that that business could immediately open because they've already developed this plan that is somewhere in their business, notwithstanding or regardless of the governor's executive order? Would that be a proper interpretation, or am I wrong?
Well, Mr. Chair, Member Senator Champion, first, this bill would have to be passed and signed into law. But once that happened, then yes, they could.
So I just want that explained to the committee, that I wanted to make sure that when I was asking some earlier questions, so any additional information that is articulated in the bill, even with this new language, would give a business the opportunity to get around an executive order or any future order that the governor comes out with related to COVID-19 or something of that nature. Even though I appreciate and I did acknowledge that a bill would have to go through the process and pass by the House and Senate and be signed by the governor, I still wanted the scenario to be very clear as to what this bill was doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, next we have, I have on my list Senator Little, Simonson, and Uckey. So Senator Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple questions for the author.
Senator Little, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question, Senator Newman, is this bill supported by the Minnesota Chamber? I guess I wasn't clear in your opening comments.
Senator Little, hold on, I got some dogs in the background. Senator Little, the Minnesota Chamber has written a letter in support. It should be in your documents.
Okay. And then my second question for the author is, outside of Senator Jensen, is this supported by the hospitals, doctors, epidemiologists in our state?
Senator Little, I have not talked to Senator Jensen nor any other healthcare providers regarding this bill. If you would remember my opening remarks, is what I'm looking for is a balance that would keep the folks in Minnesota safe while at the same time allowing people to go back to work and reopening their businesses. If we look at the, say, the Office of Preparedness that the chairman referred to, I would certainly think that that part of the bill that seeks to keep people safe would be included in any type of a plan as this thing moves forward.
And members, we are going to close this up. We are on the amendment.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Little, finish your questions, and then I do want to take a vote on the amendment if there are no other questions on the amendment.
I totally understand, Mr. Chair. I think I've used my time sparingly on these Zoom conference calls, so I'm going to use up my welcome right now, which is to say that I don't think we should be bringing forward bills, although I believe the intent is good. I don't believe we should be bringing forward bills that don't have the approval of our medical experts. This is a highly infectious disease that we know that kills people, and we can't just kind of make our own gut shot feels on how we should open up. Every single one of us wants to open up every single business in our districts. That's what we want to do. These are our friends and neighbors, as Chair Pratt said, and I feel awful for them, and I talk to them every single day like the rest of us do. But if we're going to bring a bill forward that starts opening things up, it better have the approval of the medical community, because they're the ones that know what they're talking about. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Little. So before we move on to general questions, are there any other questions regarding the amendment? Raise your hand on the screen. Okay, seeing none. Senator Uckey, to the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And my comment is to the amendment. We're going through all this conversation, adding an extra workload to our small businesses that have been forced to be closed. The majority of the big boxes have already been opened. I don't think we need to add this amendment. those that are open didn't have to do this. They did it on the fly. They've done a good job of it. Our small shops can do the same thing. I'm just not in favor of the amendment because of that. We don't need to load them up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ecke. Any other questions or comments to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye and put your thumbs up. Aye.
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 And those opposed?
No,
No.
no.
It is the chair's it's the chair's count that that the amendment fails on a vote of 6-6. We'll go back to questions. And I lost my spot, so we'll go to Senator Simonson and then Senator Draheim. Senator Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually Senator Cohen.
Oh, yeah, we're doubling up today at the proper interval, but I'll pass, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Then we have Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. Just a few comments yet moving forward. For one, I'd like a roll call vote on this.
Requested roll call will be granted.
Thank you. We heard some numbers from some other members today, and I think we have to remember over 99% of the people that have passed, which are tragic, were people in long-term care or pre-existing conditions. So people who are healthy and choose to go shop at a shop in Main Street can do that. They don't have to. So if we give them the option, give them the guidance, which I think we already have as a state, you need to plan. Here's what you have to do. There's no reason a small shop that only has a couple people in it at any given time can operate probably safer than a Walmart or a Target. So we can agree to disagree on some things. I think we have supported the governor 100% initially. Where the big debate is, when do we open up the economy? We cannot afford not to open up the economy for 2 years while we wait for a vaccine. As far as the comment about talking to the governor's office or commissioners, Commissioner Grove has been very generous with his time. I think with all of us trying to help us find a solution to get our Main Street businesses open, but we haven't seen them open, and people are in panic mode. They do not know how they are going to feed their family, pay their taxes, pay their employees. So we need to get them open, and I support this bill 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Senator Champion, you were, I cut you off from some closing comments, I thought.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just let me say, and thank you for the opportunity to, have some words. I think I get I know I get very excited when sometimes we as legislators and leaders seem to be promoting a zero-sum game or zero-sum approach. The way that this is being put forward and some of the other bills that we've seen has been centered around small businesses and Main Street. And if you're not with small businesses in Main Street and getting them open right now, then that means that you're okay with them going out of business or closing or not being around. And that is so far from the truth. What I believe that the governor has done has gotten a cross-section of information from business leaders, from the chamber, from commissioners, healthcare providers, and all the other health experts in order to figure out how to roll out a plan that brings our economy back forward, while also thinking about if there are continued increased rates of infection, do we have the hospital capacity to deal with it? In rural Minnesota, do we have it? If there's an onslaught of individuals who are affected or infected by this terrible virus and they have to go to hospital, can the medical community in rural Minnesota, as well as even in the metropolitan area. Can we handle it? So it's not just one or the other. It's a number of different things that has to be considered. So we want all businesses open as fast as possible, but with a real intentional and deliberate plan. And it's surprising to me, Mr. Chair, that we are totally overlooking businesses that are open. And I gave the example earlier of JBS and some of the other meat packing plants where they've been open. They've come up with a plan if they thought was going to work, and the rates of infection are going up and up and up. So Ms. Heising was correct. Let's have a balanced plan, not one or the other, but let's have a plan where business at the appropriate time can be open and it doesn't endanger the workers and their families. Because we've been talking about the workers, but they're connected to someone. They're connected to children. They're connected to grandmas and loved ones. And I just think it's important. And we should not miss the person who is the chief executive officer of our great state has been doing an engaging and wonderful job, and that's been approved of or highlighted by all the stats that you heard from Senator Cohen and others about his job. And to now have a bill before us that says, yes, you've been doing a great job, but we're a little nervous as to when these businesses are going to open. So even though you've been hearing from a cross section of people, we just think that you're not doing it fast enough, and we don't have any information as to the rate that it should happen, but we just believe that you're not doing it fast enough. I think that's unfortunate, and I think it fails to have full engagement of all stakeholders to balance health and economic survival. And if we are to open these businesses, we need to make sure that it's ripe, because some people are not just getting sick and staying home. Unfortunately, we have people who are dying. Not everyone are part of a long-term community or care center. Some people have underlying medical conditions. And then I heard Senator Dreheim say, well, they can choose if they want to or not. Well, this disease, unfortunately, and virus can be in someone's body and they be asymptomatic and someone else can pass it on to you. And I'm thankful that we are increasing testing and all the other things. And last but certainly not least, the economy. And Dreheim saying, Senator Dreheim saying, well, we don't want our businesses to be closed for 2 years. I don't know where he's getting this 2-year number from. Again, that's someone just taking information out of osmosis and now placing it into a policy conversation where we should be much more responsible. And we should be responsible because we've talked to and we've been engaged with a cross-section of people who are giving us accurate information, because there's too much misinformation in the marketplace because we don't know enough about this. So with all that being said, I'm glad that we're going to roll call the bill, and I'm going to encourage members to vote no, because this is not an appropriate bill at this time. And thank you, Senator Newman, for at least bringing it forward. But unfortunately, I just believe it has some unintended consequences that's not good for Minnesotans.
If I could, Chair Pratt.
Senator Dreheim, we have to really wrap this up. We're running extremely long. Be
30 seconds. Just to respond, because my name was mentioned there. The 18 to 24 months was mentioned by the governor on how long this pandemic could last. That's why I referenced that. As far as rural hospitals, a bunch of us that live in the rural areas asked each other what they're hearing from their rural hospitals, and they're empty. They have 0 patients in there. So I think the capacity is there for the beds. The capacity is there for the ICU beds. The capacity is there for the ventilators. The capacity is there for the PPE. And my hospital, my biggest hospital in my district in Northfield, is losing $1 million a week. So thank you, Chair.
Okay. Before I get to Senator Newman for some closing comments, I just want to make a few comments myself. We've heard about this. We've heard this zero-sum game, and it seems to me that the approach that we've been taking has been a zero-sum game. This has been a conversation that Commissioner Grove and I have been having since we held our first bipartisan COVID working group meeting on April 3rd. And Senator Champion, you were a part of that with Fed President Kashkari and I do think that progress has been a little too slow. I think we needed to modify and evolve our strategy to a more balanced strategy in my mind. And I think what Senator Newman is bringing to us is a balanced strategy. I wish the amendment would have passed because it would have put the very protections that we're talking about in place, the very protections that the governor and the Department of Labor outlined when they opened up other businesses and said, and you don't have to submit a plan, you just have to have one prepared. I'm trying to follow those guidelines, those protocols, those precedents that have been laid out by the administration to make sure that this is a balanced plan and not one where we're overstepping the role of the governor and we're not putting anybody at risk. Because as I said, every one of these neighbors is interested in the health and welfare of their other neighbors. I mentioned this the other day, and this came from my VFW. Michael Ostergaard, who is advising the governor, said the situation will last 2 more years. Why would the governor allow restaurants to be open this year? We will lose over half our restaurants this summer and maybe more. More fallout for nonprofits, no events and no charitable gambling, no music fest, Rotary's main income, no lakefront days, the chamber's major source of annual income, no charitable gambling, so no income for the Optimist, no income for the Lions, no income for the Lake Association, no income for Prior Lake youth programs. Prior Lake will never be the same again. How many seniors, well, let me skip that part. The state is planning for this to last 2 more years, meaning restaurants probably can't open until June of 2022. The VFW can't donate any more money for Meals for Heroes. Bad for everyone, more economic disaster than anyone can manage. Members, we've done a good job of bending the curve on the healthcare crisis. And what I think, and what I like about Senator Newman's bill is not only have we addressed some of the concerns that have been raised with the Senator Matthews bill, but it also helps us start to bend the curve on the economic crisis. So with that, Senator Newman, I'll give you some closing comments.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm going to be very respectful of your time. I realize it's running late. I want you to know I appreciate very much the conversation and the discussion. And frankly, I learned a good deal this afternoon. Folks on the job committee know more about this than I do. I truly am looking for a way to balance this out. I think it's important to the state of Minnesota, and I'm doing the very best that I can to represent my constituents out in rural Minnesota, as I am sure that you are trying to do with your constituents in your respective districts. This is a terrible situation, and I simply want to reiterate the fact that I do want to work with the governor on this, and I want to help him so that we can move forward. And this was an attempt by myself to do just that. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members, again, I just wish to thank you.
Okay. Members, a roll call has been requested. Mr. Strickland, will you take the roll?
Senator Pratt,
Aye.
Senator Eichhorn,
Aye.
Senator Champion,
No.
Senator Cohen,
No.
Senator Draheim,
Aye.
Senator Goggin,
Aye.
Senator Housley,
Aye.
Senator Little,
No.
Senator Isaacson,
No.
Senator Rarick,
Yes.
Senator Simonson,
No.
Senator Utke.
Yes.
Mr. Strickland, before you tally up the vote, I think I went to a vote without a motion. So Senator Draheim, would you move that Senate File 4511 pass the committee and be referred to the floor?
So moved.
All right, now we'll take the roll again. I'm sorry, members, my mistake. Mr. Strickland, we take the roll on the motion now.
Senator Pratt,
Aye.
Senator Icorn,
Aye.
Senator Champion,
No.
Senator Draheim,
Aye.
Senator Cohen,
No.
Senator Goggin,
Aye.
Senator Housley,
Aye.
Senator Little,
Still no.
Senator Isaacson,
Nope.
Senator Rarick,
Yes.
Senator Simonson,
No.
Senator Utke.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I sent you the tally so you can announce it.
Oh, thank you. Members, that we have 7 yes and 5 no. The motion does pass. Thank you, Senator Newman, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, we are going long, and so the 3 o'clock hearing will be moved to Facebook, and we will continue for a short period of time. But I would like to still be wrapped up by about 3 o'clock. Next, we have the confirmation hearing for Senator Steve Grove. Welcome to the committee, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner, any opening comments?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's an honor to get to join you today, and listening into the discussion that you've just had has been informative for me. This is exactly the kind of conversation that we need to be having right now at this really difficult and challenging time. I have enjoyed getting to know all of you personally, and in the past 2 months, I've gotten to talk to you a lot more than probably we'd ever imagined we'd be talking. But your advice and feedback and ideas have helped me be a better commissioner these past few months, and certainly in this last year that I've been in my first year of government service. So I'm very grateful for that, and grateful for the chance to talk to you today. I wanted to offer a couple of comments up top, just give a little bit of information on my background, and then would love to hear the questions that you have for me. I grew up in Northfield, Minnesota, Senator Draheim's district. You can see behind me here the Cows Colleges and Contentment sign that's outside of our town. We're very proud of Northfield, and I can't think of a better place to have grown up, or really a better family to have grown up in. I feel very fortunate. The oldest of 4 kids. My dad had a small landscaping business growing up that he started when I was around 5 years old, and he started it like all entrepreneurs do, just knocking on people's door in the neighborhood and asking for the chance to do work for them. And with a wheelbarrow and a shovel and a pickup truck, got started. And those early days were hard. Starting a small business is hard. And he was scrappy and built a business that supported our family. We never had health insurance growing up. I remember him bartering landscaping services to our local doctor for the labor and delivery fees for my siblings when they were born. That's the kind of stuff that happens in small towns when you work together. And you can imagine that as we've hit this crisis, and I think about the small businesses across the state who are suffering, as this discussion has just highlighted, it's that experience back in Northfield with my dad and my mom and our family that I've drawn from to try to make the best calculations and advice and recommendations that I can to the governor as we move through this crisis. My mom was a teacher's aide in the local schools. She served in classrooms, particularly that focus on autistic and special needs kids. She has more patience than anyone I've ever met in my life, and was one of the favorite teacher's aides in that school. And really, mom and dad instilled in me as a young person just the importance of community service and of giving back and of contributing to your community. They started the youth group at my local church. They contributed to our sports teams and schools. And they really did everything they could to make Northfield a special place. And I mentioned all that to say that when I grew up and got married and had a couple of kids, my wife and I had twins about 3 years ago, and thought about where we wanted to raise our kids, we really felt like Minnesota was the place to do it, and to be near family was important. And so that's part of why we are back here, and part of why I'm honored to be in this position. As I said, I haven't lived here for the last 20 years. I started out in California going to college, and then spent some time on the East Coast for grad school, some time abroad, and then was a journalist for a lot of my 20s. And then for the past 12 years, I worked at Google and had the chance to build 3 different teams there as that company grew, and we built it into the Google that you see today. And I think it was one of the fortunate experiences of my life to have that experience inside of a business, to get to grow a business, to learn how business works, and learn how an innovative company gets things done and inspires new ideas, and you can take problems and solve them with a lot of different variables in consideration. And so I hope that's been the experience that I've been able to bring to this job. When the governor asked me to do it, I knew it was a very different thing for me to do. Obviously, going from Google into the government is a shift. But I'll just say how much of an honor it has been to serve the people of Minnesota and to lead DEED at this time. And the public service that is seen throughout our department, and certainly that I get to experience every single day in working with all of you, it's been the greatest opportunity of my life professionally. I'm very grateful for it. We've had a very unique last year at DEED. I could talk at length about what we've done on the front of equity, or how we've really engaged in innovation, or really how we try to modernize the department to take a sharper look at how we navigate processes like grants administration, or how we try to save money, and how we look at spending, and how we make our processes more efficient. But it feels a little off topic to go into all of those things when the pressing crisis we're all facing is, of course, this pandemic. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we've managed this process over the last month and a half before taking some of your questions. This is certainly something that we never expected to happen, and we've done our best to prepare and keep Minnesotans safe throughout it. And my role in that for the governor has been to advise him on our economy and where it's headed, and how we can make sure that we do have a balanced approach that ensures that we're taking care of businesses and of workers, and looking at all the variables that go into these unprecedented decisions that we as a state are having to make about our near-term and long-term future. And I want to say that the decision-making process that the governor is using going into this takes into account a multitude of variables. We're looking at very specific metrics around, are our hospitals ready? Do we have enough PPE? Do we have enough surge capacity? Do we have enough healthcare workers to make sure we can handle an increase in our hospitals' needs at a time when they're growing at an unprecedented rate? And we're also looking at economic data. Where are unemployment insurance numbers going? How many businesses are facing challenges? What is the economic cost of doing all of this? And what are the economic security levers that are in place to tide that over, and how long will they last for? And then we're looking into some of the very real social aspects of this. It's difficult not to be able to do the things that we love, and that social psychology plays into all of this as well. And so I guess I would just say that, as we as a cabinet and as the governor, as our leader, have come together to make the best decisions possible along the way, we are looking at a whole host of factors. And you saw that in the model the governor laid out a few weeks back, and that we have now used to open up additional manufacturing businesses, and just this week, opening up curbside pickup and delivery for all retail establishments in the state. And that was so important for the very reasons that you were all just discussing, that we have to have a pathway back into revenue for businesses in our state. As we sit today, 92% of the workers in our state can go to work. So just to give you a sense of the scope of that, we are at 92%. Those first executive orders on restaurants and bars and places of public amusement and salons and beauty parlors, those are still in place for the reasons we all know, as it relates to social distancing and how to keep people in the mode of staying at home. But it is our intention to continue to move along that dial and open up more businesses for the same reasons you've all been discussing. The economic health of our state is not just balanced with the health of our state. They are one and the same in so many ways. Economic health leads to real health, right? If you can't put food on the table, you can't provide for your family. And so, these are the kinds of decisions that the governor and our team are making with extensive consultation with legislators, extensive consultation with this committee in particular, given your expertise, and I'd say most importantly, extensive consultation with businesses and workers across the state, which I know you're all doing as well. And those conversations are really helping shape our perspective. And just to give you one example of that, as we opened up curbside delivery and pickup, that wasn't just sort of a brainstorm that we had on a whiteboard inside of some, conference room in St. Paul. that was a move that was made in close consultation with the Minnesota Retail Association, which represents businesses across the state, and the National Retail Federation, both of which recommend a staged process to getting back into the economy. And that if you just do it all at once, you're going to have behaviors that will set us back, and we'll be right back where we started with shutting everything down, given the spikes in cases. So this move to begin to do curbside delivery and pickup such that people get used to that kind of behavior, that establishments get used to that kind of service, is something that the experts tell us, both economic experts and health experts tell us is the right way to go. And I think it's just that's just one example of the kinds of things we're trying to consider as we go forward. The last thing the governor wants to do is keep more businesses closed for longer, just because the virus may be with us for whatever length of time that may be, 18 months, 2 years. The numbers are, I think, under debate. That does not mean that therefore that timeline coincides with the length of time that businesses will be shut down. I think the governor wants to move quickly, wants to open up economic activity, and wants to see that Minnesotans can make those advancements in the right way. And we've seen that time and again. Minnesotans have shown we can come together, we can get social distancing right, and we can engage in commerce and take care of our health too. So, a usual confirmation hearing, I'd probably tell you all about the other work we're doing at DEED, and it's extensive, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of our partnership with you. But given the topic of the day, it felt like that was the piece I'd like to make sure that we address, because it's so important and we need to work together on it. And I'm grateful for that opportunity with all of you. So with that, I'll pause. I respectfully would ask for your confirmation. I'm humbled and honored to get to work alongside all of you. And I know I can only have that opportunity if you believe I deserve it. And I hope that you do. And I appreciate the chance to talk to you today. So thanks.
Well, thank you. And so I don't forget this, why don't we just go ahead and make the motion before we begin the discussion? And I'll move that Commissioner Grove be sent out of the committee with recommendation to confirm. Do we have any questions for the commissioner? I'll give just a couple of seconds here for members if they have any. Commissioner, I'm not seeing any questions come up. Just a couple of comments from my standpoint. I've appreciated working with you. We don't always see eye to eye on every topic, but I always enjoy the conversation and the process that we go through. Maybe you could just touch a little bit, and I know this isn't a normal question for confirmation hearing, but I know you've done a lot with the onslaught in your unemployment insurance division. We talked about it 3 weeks ago and some changes that you were making at the time. Maybe you can touch on the changes that you've made to help Minnesotans and how those are working.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I echo the spirit of your question. I think I feel very lucky to be able to work with you and other members of this committee on all that we've been tackling. And I think in particular, your experience in banking and finance and business is just a true value to the state. And it's been very helpful for me in navigating these times. I think, you were asked, unemployment insurance is of course at the center of all of this. And so we have expanded our staff by about 100. We doubled the number of servers we have to take in the additional load. We're now working on Sundays too. We've expanded the number of hours that we work in a given day. And we're just throwing everything we can into this. We were the first state in the country to get the first 2 of the 3 federal CARES Act implementations done, and one of the top 5 states to get all 3 in there. And I think it's a testament, really, I take no credit for this. It's a testament to this program's long-standing ability to adapt to cyclical changes. And it's part of having an economy in a cold weather state where you got to ramp up and ramp back down as unemployment claims rise in the winter and then to fall back in the spring and fall. So it's a great team. They're doing excellent work. We're giving them every resource they need, monitoring closely what's happening there. And we know that even if we're getting it better than almost every other state, for any individual for whom a bad experience comes their way, they don't care about that. And so we are working tirelessly to get answers to every last citizen in the state. And I think we're working with all of you to make sure we're answering your constituent questions really carefully too. It's so important we get that right for you and for your districts as well. So it's been an unprecedented effort, but we're happy to have the chance to do it. And it's really a testament to the great folks in our department that we've been able to keep this program running and get Minnesotans paid.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And just a quick comment. You've said that 92% have been back to work. While we were on this call, I got the report from your department. We still have 619,000 Minnesotans who have filed unemployment claims. Many of the small business workers that we're talking about, the family-run businesses, I don't know if those show up in your counts.
They do.
92%.
Yeah, Senator Pratt, let me clarify that because I think there's just so many metrics we're using. And the metric I use when I said 92% is that 92% of the workers in our state work for businesses for which there's no restriction on returning to work. That does not mean that we only have 8% of Minnesotans who are not working. It's much higher than that. The economy's suffering, and there are certainly a lot more people who aren't working. So it's not meant to say that, we're 9 in 10 Minnesotans are, life's easy. That's definitely not the case. But given the conversation on who's allowed to and not, I wanted to give that metric to get a sense for where the governor's orders have played a role in the situation that we're in.
So, any other questions for Commissioner Grove? Okay, seeing none, the motion's been made. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think some of the yeses, I maybe moved to the noes too quickly, but I'll say that the motion has passed.
I was,
Commissioner Grove's confirmation will be sent to the floor. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, members.
Finally, we last on our agenda today is the confirmation hearing for Department of Labor and Industry Commissioner Nancy Leppink. Welcome, committee commissioner.
Welcome. Thank you, Senator Chairman Pratt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we move on to the commissioner's comments, I just want to let members know there are a number of letters in your packets and online that have been sent. So, Commissioner, welcome, and please feel free to open up with any introductory remarks you have.
So, thank you, Chairman Pratt, ranking minority member Senator Champion, and members of the Senate Jobs and Economic Growth, Finance, and Policy Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to share with the committee today my qualifications for the position of Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, and the department's significant efforts over the last year in all aspects of its work to engage, consult, and collaborate with Minnesotans across the state. I would also like to briefly share with the committee the priorities for the department in the coming years. I'm here today with my husband, Matthew, and my two sons, Patrick and Christopher. Over the last year, I've had the opportunity to meet with all of the members of the committee on multiple occasions to discuss legislation, to provide technical expertise, and to help you in responding to your constituents' requests for assistance. And on each occasion, I've worked to listen and bring to the table my significant expertise and experience. And I've worked to find solutions when solutions were not, and when solutions were not immediately found, to keep the door open for further engagement. As many of you are aware, I was born in Two Harbors, Minnesota. While my father grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my mother in Newark, New Jersey, they were drawn to Two Harbors because of the community health clinic, which is a cooperative medical practice. And it was important to my father, a primary care doctor, and my mother, a social worker, to be part of a healthcare clinic that served and was supported by the entire community. My parents instilled in me from an early age that we all have a part in making the world a better place. And that started with how we lived our own lives. That in all aspects of our lives, we needed to take time to listen and to understand the perspective of others, and that we were stronger when we worked together, working in cooperation than apart. My family lived in Two Harbors until my junior year of high school, when we moved to Minneapolis. So in my life, I've had both a rich rural and urban Minnesota experience. I graduated from Minneapolis Southwest High School and went to the University of Washington in Seattle, graduating with a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology, and then returned to Minnesota to attend the University of Minnesota Law School, where I was granted my law degree. I began my career as an Assistant Attorney General with the Minnesota Attorney General's Office. The Departments of Human Rights and Labor and Industry were my client agencies, and my work for the Department of Labor and Industry focused on occupational safety and health and labor and employment standards. In 1999, after 15 years with the Attorney General's office, I had the opportunity to move to the Department of Labor and Industry and become its chief counsel. As chief general counsel, I managed a team of attorneys and was responsible for providing legal advice on agency policy and procedures, rulemaking and legislation and litigation. And during the more than 20 years that I represented the department, I worked for 6 commissioners, 1 under the Perpich administration, 2 under the Carlson administration, 1 under the Ventura administration, and 2 under the Palenti administration. And upon being appointed commissioner, I reached out to several of my former commissioners to seek their advice. And all have offered me support, and several have written letters to the committee on my behalf. As attested to by former Commissioner Scott Brenner in his letter, for each of these commissioners, no matter their party, I became a trusted legal advisor and was relied on to help them steer the legal course of the agency in response to the broad array of issues affecting the department and its many constituencies. That experience and the perspective it provided has proved invaluable as I've taken on leadership roles at the federal, international, and now again at the state level. In 2009, I was appointed by the President to be the Deputy Administrator of the Wage and Hour Division of the U.S. Department of Labor and led the division as its acting administrator through the administration's first term. In my capacity as acting administrator, I was responsible for a budget of $260 million and operations that included a national office, 5 regional offices, and 52 field offices. During my tenure, the Wage and Hour Division reimagined its strategies for achieving compliance with the laws it was responsible for enforcing and shifted its focus from reacting primarily to reactive, primarily complaint-driven investigations to compliance initiatives that were proactive, utilized multiple approaches, and engaged multiple stakeholders. This innovation made the department more effective and efficient in protecting, in particular, low-wage and vulnerable workers, and leveling the playing field for employers who were playing by the rules. This innovative work drew the attention of law enforcement agencies around the world, and ultimately the attention of the International Labor Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. Shortly after returning home to Minnesota in 2012 and taking up the position as Assistant Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Commerce, the International Labor Organization reached out to me about a position at the ILO, and in June of 2014, my family and I moved to Geneva, Switzerland, where I took up the position as Chief of the Labor Administration, Labor Inspection, and Occupational Safety and Health branch of the ILO, and led its international efforts related to occupational safety and health, and its work to improve the capacity of its member states' labor law enforcement agencies. After almost 5 years, I left my post at the ILO when I was appointed Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry by Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. I have committed my working life to public service because I believe that when promises are made by government to its citizens, it is the responsibility of government to ensure that those promises are kept. Of importance, when the government enacts worker protections such as the minimum wage and workplace safety and health laws, it is my department's responsibility to work to achieve compliance with those laws, to keep the promise of a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, and of workplaces that do no harm to their workers. Over my 30 years of experience advising and leading labor law enforcement agencies, I have learned that to achieve compliance requires a mix of approaches. Effective enforcement coupled with effective outreach and education, and to do both requires collaboration. Neither approach is effective alone, and neither can be effectively implemented by an agency acting alone. An agency must engage, it must find partners and collaborators in its efforts. That need to engage was reinforced by my experience at the International Labor Organization. Over the last 100 years, the ILO has worked in a tripartite manner, employers, workers, and governments, with the input of civil society coming together to develop international labor standards that have been ratified by countries around the world. That experience made clear to me that to find solutions to today's challenges and the challenges that will come in the future of work, government, employers, workers, and civil society must together find solutions that will achieve the common good. I have worked to apply those lessons as commissioner of the department. Since my appointment, my agency and I have worked to engage with the department's many stakeholders in its decision-making and the development and implementation of its programs, policies, rules, legislation, and IT systems, and have welcomed engagement by our stakeholders on issues that they are facing related to the department's work. The department has well-established formal mechanisms for engagement. It has 8 boards and councils that provide advice and make recommendations to the department on policy, regulations, legislation that includes representatives of both industry and labor. The council that is likely the most familiar to this committee is the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. As commissioner, I am the chair of the council, and over the past summer, I worked to ensure that legislative proposals were brought before the council in an orderly manner, with the full engagement of stakeholders and sufficient time for the council's deliberations. Due to my efforts, the council completed its work, provided its recommendations, which received unanimous approval to the legislature before its statutory deadline. The leaders of both business and the Labor Caucus publicly expressed in the January meeting their appreciation for my leadership in guiding and supporting the council's work. In addition to these formal means of engagement, the department also actively engages stakeholders in its programs, such as the OSHA consultation and workforce development programs. The Occupational Safety and Health Consultation Program in the last year engaged with over 1,000 small businesses, providing them with on-site consultation services to assist them in improving their workplace safety and health, and issuing $1.2 million in grants to employers to offset the cost of safety improvements. And that very part of the agency has now stood up additional staff to meet the ongoing need of this COVID crisis for employers who are reopening and need assistance with developing their plans for reopening, and over the phone or in on-site visits. And we are fully staffed to meet the needs of all of the communities in Minnesota. The department's workforce development program also has significant engagement with the participants in that program. That YSD program has received strong support from members of this committee, and it has funded 27 partnerships and is working with more than 40 employers across the state to provide employment experiences for youth 16 years of age and older. And the department's dual training pipeline program engages almost 2,000 industry leaders. These leaders receive updates and about the program and invitations to participate in program events. And the department's registered apprenticeship program regularly engages with industry and labor. And in the last year, 27 new apprenticeship sponsors were added to the program, many in high demand industries such as manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and transportation. These workforce development efforts have been successful in large part due to the collaboration with industry associations such as the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association, employers like Ajax Metal Forming Solutions, and the Construction Trades Training Centers, all of whom have provided letters of support for my confirmation to the committee. I have already testified before the committee about the department's outreach efforts related to the implementation of the wage theft law, but I would like to share with the committee a few additional examples of my efforts to respond to the needs of stakeholders. So early last summer, prior to the grain bin related deaths, I had determined that my agency needed to more proactively engage with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the agriculture community on how we could assist in addressing the significant number of fatalities and serious injuries in the agriculture sector in Minnesota. As a result of those efforts, after several grain bin fatalities last fall, the Farmers Union reached out to us for the first time, seeking our input on legislation that would provide technical assistance and financial support for farmers to improve grain bin safety. The department also leapt into action when it received urgent calls from the construction sector that municipal building code enforcement offices were reducing permit and inspection services in reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic, actions that would quickly shut down the construction industry. In response, I met with the director of CCLD, our Construction Codes and Licensing Division. We determined that the department should push out an email message to all of the municipal building code offices requesting that they contact the department if they had or were considering reducing their services, and further pushed out to licensed contractors a telephone number to contact if they were experiencing difficulties obtaining permits or scheduling inspections. The department directly engaged with more than 150 municipalities, and for those municipalities that had or were considering reducing services, the department worked with them to find solutions that would allow them to continue their services and successfully got things back on track. My agency and I have similarly worked to respond to requests from legislators. After being asked by you, Chairman Pratt, to attend a meeting with Senator Rude and owners of Paul Bunyan Land Amusement Park, I personally took responsibility for working with them to draft legislation that would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to safely operate amusement rides, resolving a long-standing issue with Minnesota child labor laws. And after discussions with Senator Eichhorn about his youth skills training legislation that would expressly include charter schools and homeschooled students in the program, I asked my staff to include in their 2020 work plan efforts to more proactively engage with charter schools and families who homeschool their children. And Senator Eichhorn has offered to assist in that effort by identifying contacts for homeschooling cooperatives in Minnesota. I take every effort to meet personally with stakeholders and legislators seeking my agency's assistance. So I'd like to conclude my testimony by discussing just briefly my priorities for the department. In the months that preceded the current crisis, I engaged in conversations with all of my agency staff, putting before them a series of questions, many drawn from the conversations I've had with employers, workers, and the department's many stakeholders, to develop priorities for the department. And from those conversations, the following priorities emerged: the need for greater inclusion and equity across departments' programs, the need to develop and update technology to more effectively deliver services, and the need for greater use of data to inform decision-making and policy development. Increased investment in staff by ensuring that they have the necessary knowledge, skills, materials, and tools to do their best work. The implementation of compliance strategies that are data-driven and that engage multiple interventions and stakeholders. Increases in the diversity and number of participants in the department's workforce development programs, and improvement in the sustainability of the department's processes, procedures, and practices. Of course, at this moment, our priority is to assist Minnesotans in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and defining the new normal that will protect the lives of Minnesotans against this terrible disease. But I have reflected on the priorities that my staff and I developed in light of the pandemic, and I've concluded they remain relevant and that pursuing these priorities will make us better in our fight against COVID, and they will be crucial as we prepare for what comes next. And finally, I would like to express that it has been a privilege to lead with the support of my dedicated executive team, the department. The Department of Labor and Industry employees are committed public servants who have stepped up in this crisis and applied the wealth of their experience and expertise to meet the challenges we are facing as a state and a nation. So I thank you for your attention, and I close my remarks by seeking your support for my confirmation as Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just so we get the motion on the table before we start getting into questions, I'd like to make a motion that Commissioner Leppink be sent out of the committee without recommendation. First question I have is from Senator Rarick. Then I have Champion and Housley. So Senator
Rarick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't have any questions, but I just want to make a couple of comments. I have had a good relationship with Commissioner Leppink personally. She's been to my office a number of times. We don't agree on everything. That's not an issue that I have. But I heard over and over from places, HR departments in my district this summer about the wage theft issue and how difficult it was to deal with that. I've heard some stories of in other circumstances, but I don't want to, I know we're short of time. the one, I'm a representative of both, union labor and also business as a one-man electrical contractor. And I know how hard it is sometimes to walk the line and be able to represent both. But I think as we look at some of this, I'm not sure that industry has been represented well. And the one issue that I just can't get beyond is what happened with Valley Fair and Paul Bunyan land. There was 15 years of precedent allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to work, and kind of at the last minute they were hit and lost that ability last year. And I struggle with that one yet. So unfortunately, I will be voting in favor of this motion.
Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the commissioner, I was just listening intensely to your impressive resume and your resume, your work experience, and as I think it was Senator Pratt who mentioned earlier that the committee's been inundated with support letters from other leaders, but also labor. In fact, I think we probably got like 15 to 16 letters, which is really impressive. My first question to you is, can you or will you share with us how you believe your experience, both educationally and professionally, will help you in this role as a commissioner? And then can you speak to what was raised as it pertains to some precedent that had to be revisited? And I understand that you're general counsel and a lawyer, and you have experience from the Attorney General's office to Switzerland to other places, spaces. And can you loop that in to give us some sense of what happened with the Paul Bunyan place of space, and how that situation guides or will help us see what you would do in the future whenever it comes to any issue?
So thank you, Senator Champion. So I think probably of all of the experiences that I've had, that clearly working under 6 different commissioners allowed me an opportunity to become fully versed in the kinds of challenges and the issues that come up for my agency. And furthermore, made me very familiar with all of the different constituencies and what are the concerns of those constituencies when they look at the responsibilities of my agency. And so consequently, I think it's helped me over the last year when we've had industry groups, when we've had employers come to the department. First of all, it allows me to more immediately understand what are the challenges that they face, how we can provide assistance to them. For example, under the COVID-19, when the governor began to look at reopening non-critical businesses, my agency was tasked with how do we provide assistance to those businesses so that they have a roadmap that they can readily follow, particularly small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So we're not talking about the Targets or the Best Buys, but we're talking about those folks who haven't been open and would need some support in navigating through CDC guidelines and MDH guidelines to help them address the situations in their businesses. So my agency worked up a very simple template plan that would work to prompt employers to think through what they needed to regarding hygiene, regarding sanitation, regarding social distancing. And then furthermore, work with the Department of Health and to create a checklist that would go along with that plan. So it is that kind of experience that I believe, particularly in the time that I worked for the agency as its general counsel, that I became very familiar with the issues of both labor and industry in how they work to navigate the laws that are the responsibility of my department. So as for the child labor, and first of all, I want you to know that had I known that this was going to be a hardship for Paul Bunyan Land, and as I've said before and testified before this committee, that that would have been something that would have at least made it. We would have looked for how to manage and potentially prioritize how to get that situation fixed. I certainly would not have deliberately caused any hardship to that company if I had known about it. And once it was brought to my attention in the meeting with Senator Rood and Senator Pratt, I immediately offered to work to find a solution so that when they opened this season, they would not find themselves in the same situation. And I was successful in doing that. We developed legislation. It has moved through the legislature, and I fully expect it to pass. And of course, the administration has given its support for that proposal. And so Paul Bunyan Land will be ready to be able to hire the workers that it needs. Can you still hear me? I seem to have
Yep,
stopped.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay,
Mr. Chair? Oh, go ahead.
So anyway, so the issue with the law was that Paul Bunyan Land, so under the child labor laws, I have authority to grant exemptions to certain of the hazardous orders. So under current law, but soon to be changed, 16 and 17-year-olds are not allowed to operate amusement rides. So I have limited discretion to grant exemptions to various child labor laws in the state, but it's limited. And I may only grant exemptions under certain circumstances. If the exemption is in the best interest of the minor involved and the minor has a special talent, unique qualifications, or a special need for particular employment for which the exemption is sought. And so consequently, the requests that were made by Paul Bunyan Land did not fit that exemption language. And therefore, in my opinion, I was not, based on my legal opinion, I was not in a position to grant those exemptions. And that is the basis upon which I made the decision.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. I know that there's a number of different folks who have some additional questions, and I know that I can ask another question, but I'm going to reserve that for later. But I just want to say that thank you for your work, your experience, your education, your commitment to public service. It's also clear that you have, tried to not only be a solid legal mind, but also understand the uniqueness of various communities, and been trying your best to navigate through that in a respectful and consistent way. So thank you for that, but I'm going to yield my next question until later. Thank you, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Upke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. We've had many meetings and phone calls, and I appreciate that. We've had a lot of different topics to discuss. And most of what I got would probably bring up some we've heard already, and others we have talked about in the office here. Some of the things that have been a concern all along. Of course, number one was the wage theft bill and where that went to. But the 16 and 17-year-olds, that's the issue that never seems to go away. And that ties right into the amusement parks, but also into those that we want to get into the workforce if they're willing and able. I know today we discussed a lawnmower bill on the floor, and of which I've voiced my opinion in the past. I don't think we need to give permission to that age group to drive a lawnmower, but that's a whole nother thing. And then we've had some many conversations, I guess, with the Work Comp Advisory Council. And I guess the last one was probably last fall when we were trying to work on, there was penalties and such for our providers. And in the end, we kind of passed on that for right now because you had ideas and I think I had, and some others had various ideas. We decided it needs more work. But my question would be if you could fill us in a little bit. A lot of your history, a lot of your work seems to all been either defending labor or working heavily with labor. Can you give me some examples of where you've really gone to bat for business and industry? Because honestly, I see a heavy emphasis on the labor side, and we care about them all. But you know, in a position like you're at, to me, it needs to be kind of a neutral. We need to go both ways. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So Chairman Pratt, Senator Utke, I think that there's actually a significant part of the department's work that is focused on primarily industry and business. Certainly our workforce development work, the YST, the dual training pipeline programs, and our apprenticeship programs are all of them have significant engagement with employers, meeting employers' workforce needs. Among the letters of a recommendation to me is the Precision Manufacturing Association, where we have expanded all of our workforce development programs into manufacturing and have worked with them to help get students interested in manufacturing, to actually build and skill up workers who are already employees, and of course to build additionally to build apprenticeship programs for particular skills that industry needs. And so consequently, the department has engaged significantly in the manufacturing, but also in automotive. We've worked closely with healthcare in our dual training and our YST program. And so consequently, the department does a significant amount of work, and the focus of our work is to meet those workforce development needs. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, we also do have a free consultation service where in this past year, we engaged with over 1,000 businesses who sought us out, asking us for assistance in improving occupational safety and health in their businesses. And that program is focused particularly on small business and the needs of small businesses to improve their workplace safety and health. And in addition, we issued $1.2 million in grants from the assigned risk safety account to those businesses to actually offset the cost of some of those safety improvements. And I think too that, it's always a challenge when you are an enforcement agency because that inevitably means that you have an obligation to enforce the law. But the reality is that even at the hearing last year about wage theft, we heard from employers who were struggling to compete in an environment in which there was not effective enforcement of the state's minimum wage and overtime and misclassification laws. And so I see that my role is actually to level the playing field for all of the Minnesota employers who are doing the right thing and working to comply with the law. And so therefore, it's in their interest that they not have to compete against people who are paying their workers only in tips or are giving them cash under the table and not paying into the work comp system as they should. And so consequently, maintaining the integrity of the workplace allows those employers to do the right thing and to protect their workers, to pay their workers properly, to ensure that they have the necessary workers' compensation. And so consequently, though enforcement often has sort of a bad rap, part of its true benefit is to those employers who are playing by the rules.
Sorry, I had to mute myself because of the dogs. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Leppink. I was really struggling with this recommendation today after the Paul Bunyan, and they were blindsided after they've been doing it the same way for decades. But then you apologized and you took responsibility for that and realized that you had made a mistake. But I'm seeing the same thing happen with the wedding barn venues. These are small family-owned businesses that conduct weddings in their barns that they've refurbished to have weddings. And for years, they've been classified as an A3, and they have their local authorities, local inspectors inspecting these wedding barns and giving them the okay as per Dolly's instructions or code. And then all of a sudden this last year, it changed and the whole world changed. And now they're classified as A2s and they have to put in these elaborate sprinkler systems, 200,000 up to 500,000, some of them, in order to operate, which completely puts them out of business. They've tried to get a meeting with you. They haven't been able to get a meeting with you. I've got the list of how many times they've emailed and called, haven't been able to get a hold of you. Now, these small businesses they've canceled their weddings to the end of July. They are going under. And what really put me over today was just today, your department sent out the notice that they were now going to go and enforce these codes in these small wedding barns that are out of business. So it's just extremely disappointing for these wedding barn venues. There's more than 120 of them across the state that I don't see any help coming from your department or from you to really, really help them. And then this today was like kicking them when they're down or a slap in the face. And it's just really disappointing. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
So, Chairman Pratt, I'd like, if I may respond to that question. And first of all, to clarify that it's my understanding that the challenges that the wedding barns are facing is related to the fire code. The Department of Labor and Industry does not enforce the fire code, and therefore we are not in a position to resolve that situation. I am not aware of contacts being made to me or to the department, so therefore I cannot respond to that. But I know that my staff had been working with the wedding barns, and to the extent that our jurisdiction was over them, we were working cooperatively with them, and that we had addressed all of the issues that were there. But this is the issue that you're now raising, Senator Housley, is not on my agency's jurisdiction. It is not something that we have authority over. And therefore, I know that my staff has reached out to the fire code officials to make sure that they were aware of this situation. But it's not a situation that I'm in control of. And I'd be happy to, continue to work with you on that. And also to work to bring the parties together to see if there's some solution to this situation. But it's not in my authority to respond particularly to the fire code requirements.
I'm just going to leave it at that. This came from your department today, May 6th is what it is. Just got emailed to all of the wedding barn venues throughout the state. And it says, in locations without local code enforcement, the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry has jurisdiction for enforcement of the state building code. So that was your email from your office today.
But that's
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that we're clear. Senator Housley seems to be talking about a building code, and the commissioner is talking about a fire code. And so I think we should be clear, because if we put something out in the marketplace that would suggest that she has control over a fire code, which she says she doesn't, and the letter she's referencing talked about a building code. Can we get some clarity to that? And maybe Senator Housley can help us with that. Because it sounds.
Senator Housley made it clear when she talked about.
You know what, and I'll be brief, Eric, because I know you have to move on. My point is, the wedding barn venues have communicated with the commissioner, tried to get a meeting with her to get this A3, A2 clarification. I have a bill out there right now trying to clarify because they're in limbo. And now they've completely canceled all of their weddings. And then to get this kick in the face today that they're going to now be inspected, they were just, they're dying out there. And so that's where where's the empathy for any of our small businesses? That's just my point, Senator Champion. And I'll move on, Senator Pratt.
Senator Leppink, or Commissioner Leppink, any thoughts on?
So Senator Pratt, now that this issue has been brought to my attention, I certainly will double back with my staff to see if there's any role that the department can play related to this situation. But we do not enforce the fire code. And so consequently, while I certainly can work to convene, to engage, to bring the parties to the table, ultimately the decision regarding the requirements of the fire code is in the hands of another authority.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for the commissioner? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Commissioner, thank you. You've been, you've been responsive to me, and I'll say what I said about Commissioner Grove. We haven't seen eye to eye on a lot of the policy issues, and that's fine. Lately, you've been, extremely willing to meet with small business people, and I appreciate the call that you gave me the other day. But there have been concerns along the way, and we can talk about wage theft and the fact that the department, through their FAQs, expanded the law, filled in the blanks in such a way that exceeded the statute and created a lot of confusion. You and I heard that from a number of folks at the beginning of session when I was accused of basically a dog and pony show in committee, and yet many of those concerns were extremely valid. And so difficulty in trying to clarify the language statutorily so that where you would prefer to continue to do it through the FAQs, I don't want to have that same having that same statute misconstrued again or by another administration. And so I found that difficult. You and I have a very different recollection of the meeting with the amusement rides. And while I'm glad we got to a resolution, I can say that it should have been one where, Paul Bunyan Land went and Valley Fair went and others went an entire year without those exemptions, and found it very difficult to communicate with your department to get those exemptions or to get those meetings. It ended up being Senator Root and I having to confirm those. And again, you and I have discussed it. I have a different recollection of how we left that meeting at that time, and I appreciate we got it done, but it was difficult. And then I think of the preemption on the wage theft, or on the workers' compensation going into COVID. And you and I were in communication. We took we wanted to get something to the Work Comp Advisory Committee. It was rejected by labor. I worked very, very hard to get the Chamber of Commerce and others to engage in that conversation, and yet there was no follow-up. It ended up being me and another senator working through that, acting as moderators between labor and industry. And when we had a deal, you didn't support it. Even though we had full agreement from all those that were being represented. We ended up spending another 4 days working on it with what seemed to be pretty minor changes. And and when we talk about work comp, when we talk about wage theft, and when I ask if you've talked to the business owners, the answer, at least those 2 times, was no. And that to me is troubling when we're talking about a commissioner of labor and industry. And so, you know, those are the comments that I have. I you know, certainly I think in the last week and a half, things have gotten a lot better, but certainly what I would have liked to have seen happen, say at the beginning of this session, despite the challenges that we had last session. Commissioner Leppink, you wanted to say a few things?
So as the Commissioner of Labor and Industry, particularly when it comes to workers' compensation, I have a unique role, which is to chair the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. In that role, I'm a non-voting member, and it's the expectation of the business and the labor caucus that I'm going to facilitate, in effect, their negotiations and their discussions of workers' compensation, on workers' compensation proposals. And so consequently, where we found ourselves was the department actually worked to find a common ground on that bill. And in fact, much of the language that we proposed actually became the law. But at that point, labor was not happy with that proposal, but also neither was the business caucus. And when we sought out with the business caucus to receive what they would propose in the alternative, it took another week for us to receive a proposal from the business caucus. And so as a consequence, by that point, the Senate, you Senator, and other members of the legislature were involved and then negotiating the deal. And so at that point, the whole focus of the negotiations shifted to the legislature, and it was no longer then in the hands of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council process. And so therefore, however, the department continued to work and particularly believed that there was a need to focus on not only the substantive law, but also on how these increased claims would be paid for. And so consequently, you know, we continue to work to try to find a comprehensive solution to the situation, fully knowing that my process is through the Work Comp Advisory Council, and therefore there's a need to engage them. And unfortunately, the Work Comp Advisory Council, it's a very good process. You and I agree on that, but it doesn't move quickly. And so therefore, in an emergency, it has a greater difficulty reaching the kinds of consensus that can be more quickly reached in negotiations by the legislature under those kinds of circumstances. And so consequently, consequently, the role of the agency then ultimately was then to have to be inserted into the legislative process rather than the Work Comp Advisory Council process. And there were significant concerns of the administration regarding certain provisions in the bill that was ultimately negotiated and that ultimately we were successful in resolving. And so consequently, and much to the satisfaction of at least the labor part of the negotiations. And so therefore, that obviously process did not proceed as would have been the case if there had been more time for the deliberations of the council itself. But ultimately, the language that was negotiated was brought back, and the council ultimately approved of it. And I think that the ability to get the council's approval was in part because of the efforts of the department to make the changes that it did or proposed, and the administration proposed at the end of the negotiations, that was then ultimately the means by which the entire labor caucus could vote unanimously for the bill. So, thank you.
Okay, Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, probably I have a couple questions, a couple things I want to raise, and then it may turn into a question. So, Mr. Chair, I've been listening intensely to every issue that has been put forward, the complaints that have come forward, those things that the committee feels strongly about, and I certainly respect everyone's viewpoint. But here's what it boils down as far as, well, to me. One is, we on one hand say that we enjoy and appreciate and promote the independent thinking of commissioners, and that we will judge them on something other than whether we agree with them or not. But then it appears that everything I'm hearing is on issues that folks don't agree with them on, where this commissioner has put forth her independence based on the law, not based on personality, not based on if she doesn't like someone or not. For an example, Mr. Chair, I'm a little shocked to hear you say that on the wage theft issue, and I know that you worked really hard on the wage theft issue, and in fact, I, and who is now Senator Smith, and I worked feverishly on the wage theft issue even before you came onto our, came in and did a wage theft bill that we still appreciate, right? We believe that it could have gone a little further, but it is what it is. At the very start of this legislative year, we had a hearing on wage theft, and you brought in a number of business owners, no employees, to talk about their interpretation of some of the information that was being put forward that you said was confusing. And then you use today that you now say that the commissioner was expanding the law of the wage theft bill through the FAQs, or frequently asked questions. And that's not what I recall being the testimony of this commissioner or any of the other folks that were there. They did say that there was FAQs that were put forward, and when the department attempted to give examples or say things that the business might think about as a way to handle certain issues, that some employers said it was confusing. This commissioner, as I understood it, says, hey, we were just trying to give as much guidance as possible or real life examples. And so we'll take that out because we were not trying to confuse anyone. We were trying to be as helpful as possible. So I think there's a difference between someone supplying information for guidance as opposed to what I understand as a lawyer is when someone says, I'm attempting to expand the law in some shape, form, or fashion. I didn't take it as that. But guess what? The law is not black or white, it's gray. And everyone has their own interpretation, and you have yours. But it appears that because there appeared to be some concerns about information that was put forward, even when the department tried to help, that now you all are taking the position, and probably much more specifically you, Mr. Chair, you are taking the position that it was done with some other sinister motive, and I don't necessarily think that was true.
That's not what I said.
Secondly,
Senator Champion, that's not what I said,
yep.
And that's not what I inferred. And
to me,
very clearly, so please don't disparage me, and please don't take my remarks out of context.
Well, that gets to my point of interpretation, because just what you just said now is that's not what you said, and that's not what you inferred. But I'm sitting on this end, and I'm on the phone listening, and that is the way I heard it. And others would probably think differently. Maybe they might agree with you. Maybe they might agree with me. But that's the challenge sometimes with communication. We may have our own interpretation and our desired outcome that may be misinterpreted. And what I'm suggesting is that the department's actions were also misinterpreted. And that wasn't the act of what they were attempting to do when we think in terms of expanding the law. Here's the second thing.
You inferred my motives,
yep.
And that's not in line with Senate rules and protocol.
No, I said that you were the one who said they were attempting to expand the law. I wrote it down. And so, point well taken. No disrespect to you, Mr. Chair, but that is how I took your comment. And here's the second thing. Around the workers' compensation bill, it sounded like there was a number of different things going on, but it's my understanding that when there was an impasse, that it wasn't anyone else who took up the mantle other than Senator Miller. It's my understanding that Senator Miller stepped in because other people could not agree. None of the parties could agree, and that it was Senator Miller who stepped in and brought labor to the table and some other people to the table, and then others were working on the peripheral, which is what I hear the commissioner, say. So all I'm saying is, I just think that it's unfortunate when we fail to recognize different vantage points and law. Everyone has a difference in the way that they interpret the law. I don't take it that anyone meant anything sinister. I just think it's a matter of misinterpretation of individuals' actions. But I don't think that should be negatively inferred to the commissioner, which I unfortunately think that's what I hear. Whether that's your intent, that's what I hear. And I hope that we would all agree not to do that, because I think then we are creating precedent. I heard that word earlier, precedent as to what should or should not happen. And it's true that there are times when something has gone on, even with Paul Bunyan or others, where for a long time, one person interpreted this way, but then you get another lawyer to come in and they interpret it another way. That's not unusual. But the question is, did the commissioner do the important work in order to try to find a viable solution that she believed would help not only her department, but most importantly, Paul Bunyan? And the answer is yes. And so it is for those reasons that I wish that we were not entertaining a motion to have this commissioner confirmation go forward without recommendations, because I think that she has more than proved that she's qualified. She's a public servant. She's only had the best intent, interest of the public, because even being at the Attorney General's office, I used to work at the Attorney General's office also as an Assistant Attorney General. Our role was to make sure we were protecting the public, every member of the public, not a certain segment of the public, the entire public. And so it is for that reason that I wish that we were doing this differently, Mr. Chair. And I'm disappointed that we are going to vote on a recommendation, a motion to send her recommendation forward without any recommendations. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Champion. And just my closing remarks before we get to the commissioner. I appreciate her public service. She and I have talked about this. It's not about differences in policy. I have some concerns with how the department has handled both of its role as a representative of labor and a representative industry. And I never suggested it was sinister. And I'm offended by the very insinuation that was the case. And so with that, Commissioner Leppink, any closing thoughts?
Nothing other than I thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. And I also would seek again your support for my confirmation as the Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry.
Thank you, members. The motion on the table is Commissioner Leppink be sent out of the committee without recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. It is the opinion of the chair that the motion does pass. Members, thank you for your time. Thank you, Commissioner. I know we went an hour plus more than we had anticipated, so I appreciate you making the extra time for us. Members, we don't have anything on the calendar as of now, but watch your emails as things come up, and certainly there are some efforts going on behind the scenes with the House that I'd like to bring forward for. I hope to be able to bring forward to this committee regarding our response to the COVID-19 crisis. So with that, we'll stand adjourned until the call of the chair.
Aye.